Hey guys, Michael from Copper vs Glass, and in today's video we are checking out the new budget option from CUBOT. This here is the CUBOT P50. Now it comes with a 6.2 inch display, octa-core processor, triple lens setup, and a really nice design, but is it all smoke and mirrors, and what exactly are you getting for that price? Well, let's take a look. Now, the P50 is a very slim and light device. It comes in at only 9.4mm and is only 200 grams. Now, yes, the all-plastic design does make it feel a little bit cheap, but then again, it is pretty low in terms of value. Yes, they could have maybe used a little bit more in terms of premium materials, but all that would have done is just increase the overall price. Now the left of the device is going to be completely clear. On the right hand side you've got volume up and down, and then on the bottom you do have USB-C for charging, your speaker, microphone, and then on the top you've got that long lost relic, a 3.5mm headphone jack. And then of course around front you're going to find your 6.2 inch display, but we'll get onto more of that in a moment. And then looking around the device, as you can see, there's actually nowhere to put your SIM card. However, the back of this device is actually completely removable. So a little bit old school like the headphone jack, but once you take off this backing, you can get access to your 4200 mAh battery, dual SIM card slots, and also your place to put your microSD expansion card, which can go up to 512 gigabytes. Now, this is really rare to see on modern smartphones. Yes, it does mean that you have to buy a separate battery, for example, if you want to hot swap the batteries instead of waiting for it to charge, but it's a nice option to have. Having removable batteries is one of those things that you don't really need until you do, if that makes sense, but overall a nice design, and again the backing is a little bit flimsy in terms of the plastic design overall, but a pretty nice package. Now, one criticism that I would have is the all plastic design. Now, don't get me wrong, it kind of looks okay in certain situations. The back has a nice feel to it, but the ring around the edge in terms of the sort of metal or fake metal band that you've got, in my case this gold version here, does have a very sort of bright yellow gold to it, which doesn't look very premium. In some cases, the phone actually feels a little bit cheaper than the $169 would have you believe. And then next up we have that display. Now, like I mentioned, it comes in at 6.2 inches, 720 by 1520 in terms of the resolution. Now, it comes with a 60Hz refresh rate, which is a little bit disappointing. Some other budget options for even around $99 or around £100 here in the UK do actually come with 90 or 120Hz screens. Now, the 60Hz, as we'll get onto in the performance, does make it feel a lot slower than I think it actually is, but overall the screen itself is not too bad. It's got a 19:9 aspect ratio, so it's very tall, but it does also feel very slim and kind of reminds me of the aspect ratio of some of the newer Sony devices. The top corners are a bit of a stretch, even for my larger hands. Now, also along the top where you do have your notifications and the time, for example, the way that the screen radius goes around, especially the top, it does basically cut into certain elements. Now, it's not the most important stuff up there, you can still see the time, but again, it just doesn't have that kind of polish that you may be expecting. Now, the screen to body ratio according to CUBOT's website is 90.3%. However, the pictures on the site are drastically different. The bezels on the website are a good 2 to 3mm slimmer online than what you're going to find in person. And that's going to be a little bit of a trend with this review. Some of the advertising materials that CUBOT uses in regards to phone design, camera, and a couple of other things aren't necessarily true to life. Now, the side bezels are very slim, however the bottom bezel is also a lot larger in the hand compared to the marketing. The top bezel with the water drop camera cutout is also larger, so overall the top and the bottom bezels are not really too much like the sides, and they're not as even as what CUBOT may have you believe, especially if you look at some of the stuff they've got on their website. It seems to be sort of a very even bezel all the way around apart from that camera drop there, but it's not necessarily like that. Again, it's kind of a mix of maybe a newer Sony device and some of the older Nokia Lumia devices. It's pretty thick in the bezels. Now, screen colours are nice overall, and the screen does look pretty good. Now, if you do pixel peep, and you will see the resolution isn't necessarily as high as you may want it, but overall it looks okay. Now, the outside viewing isn't great due to the low brightness, along with the viewing angles. If you do view this slightly off axis, you are going to see some colour shift and also some dimming as well, so it's not necessarily the best screen for every single circumstance that you can think of. However, if you are just using it sort of around the house, or you're giving it to your children to watch some Netflix or Disney Plus, for example, I don't really think they're going to find many complaints. So overall the screen is nice. It's not the most colour accurate or the brightest screen or have the deepest black levels, but just for day-to-day tasks, web browsing, social media, things like that, it actually looks okay. Now, one thing that I was actually massively disappointed about is the speaker. The speaker is extremely tinny, there's no bass to it, and at those higher volumes you get a ton of distortion. Just listen to this sample. But next up, we have the specs. Now we're going to have a MediaTek Helios P22 octa-core processor, 8GB of RAM and 128GB of storage, which is also expandable up to 512GB with that microSD card that I mentioned before behind that removable back. Now again, going back to some of the marketing material, CUBOT states that this is a flagship level chipset. Again, not really so much. Now benchmarks are not everything, but comparing it alongside the P50 and my Galaxy S22 Plus, you can see a massive difference. Now overall the speed of the P50 is okay, but nowhere near up to the flagship standards. Apps load at a good rate and launch fast. Games run okay if you do limit your expectations. Don't expect to be playing any AAA games like Genshin Impact, Apex Legends, or any of the games that I featured recently in my AAA series when you've got some really awesome shooters that are available on console, also on mobile, and that video will be linked in the description down below. However, some older games and also some really well optimized Android games do actually run okay. Call of Duty Mobile, for example, it kind of works, but again, frame rate wise, you're probably going to be looking at between 30 and 40 frames a second, nowhere near the 90 or even 120 frames that you may get on some other devices, or even up to the 60 frames that the screen is actually capable of. And the 60Hz display does also affect overall performance. For me, the actual screen itself is more around sort of 30 or 40 Hz. So when you're moving around applications, playing games, or you're going in and out of apps, multitasking, using the camera, whatever it may be, there's just a real sluggishness overall to the device. Now, I don't necessarily think that this is all down to the processor and what the actual internals can do, but just the screen itself just doesn't feel very responsive. But now onto my favourite part of any smartphone review, and that's the camera. Now again, following on with the trend, CUBOT says it is a triple AI camera setup. Now it's not going to be the traditional wide, ultra-wide and telephoto that you may be expecting, and it's not necessarily the best setup overall. There's actually really only one usable camera, which is a 12 megapixel standard wide camera. You're also going to be getting a 5 megapixel macro lens, which is good for a couple of shots here and there, but it gets pretty boring pretty quickly. And then you're also going to find, and get this, a 0.3 megapixel camera. And this is a photosensitive lens. Now, I can't really see too much stuff about it online, so I'm not really sure exactly what it does. You can switch from the main camera to the macro camera, but you can't switch over to the other camera that is on the back. So it's not necessarily a triple camera setup, because some of them are only there to provide extra support, such as, helping with portrait shots and, clarity and AI features and things like that. You don't really have three specific focal lengths to shoot from. So let's talk about that main 12 megapixel lens. This is the Sony IMX486 sensor, so it has the name, but does it actually perform? Well, I'll leave that up to you guys with a quick photo and video sample direct from the P50. Now these are all going to be shot in auto mode. The camera itself can only shoot 30 frames a second at 1080p for the video, so definitely something to keep in mind, but let's take a look and see if it's any good. So as you can see from the camera samples, it's a little bit lackluster when it comes to the overall clarity, color, HDR, and just in general the photo performance and the processing side of things as well. And don't even get me started on the video. This is definitely not the camera that you want to be buying or the smartphone that you want to be buying if you do take a ton of photos and you want that really high resolution capture and 4K video or even 8K video, high frame rates. This isn't necessarily the one for you. But now onto the battery life, and with the lower resolution screen and the not so amazing internals, the battery life is actually pretty darn good. Now easily this is a 2 to 3 day device with no issues overall. Even when playing games, the phone lasts a lot longer than I was expecting, and that's probably down to the fact that it's going to be pushing fewer pixels and it's going to have lower overall graphics. So in general, the battery itself is pretty good. There's no sort of super fast charging built on board, but you do have that swappable battery, but the charging itself is pretty respectable in terms of speed. I was able to get from 0 to 100% in around 2 hours or so using a 35 watt charger. And that's actually going to do it, guys, on my review of the CUBOT P50 budget smartphone. Now, I've mentioned the price a lot in this video, and that's because, again, $169 for this device is not necessarily a bad deal overall, but you definitely have to limit your expectations. If you want to be playing some really graphically intense games, taking the best photos, listening to some music with some really awesome speakers, and just in general having a really good viewing experience with the screen, then again, this phone isn't for you. But then again, it's, maybe 8 times cheaper than what you're going to be paying for a flagship device. It's a pretty good phone for maybe weekend use, or if you do want to use it as a secondary phone. If, for example, you want to go on holiday and you don't want to take your $1,000 device with you, this may be an option to still use it for calls and things like that and not really worry about it at the end of the day. But overall, can I recommend it as a daily driver? Well, I would actually have to say kind of no. Now, don't get me wrong, I know that there is a market out there for budget smartphones, but I just think there are some better options out there, and I've also done some videos on some budget smartphones that I will link in the description down below if you did want to maybe have a look at some other options that are available. Now, if you guys have ever used a CUBOT device, let me know in the comment section down below exactly which one it was and what your user experience was like. I really do want to know. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed, now's a great time to do so. And don't forget, once you've hit that subscribe button, don't forget to turn on all notifications so you're notified anytime I post a video here on the channel. I'm Michael from Copper vs Glass. Thanks very much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next video.